Tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora for those listeners and watchers that are viewing this on our Predator-Free Te Tai Tokerau YouTube channel. No mai haere mai. This is our quarterly hui for December. And today we're fortunate enough to be hearing from Principal Scientist in the Landscape Threats Team, Craig Gillies. And so Craig might be a familiar face for some of you in Te Tai Tokerau, having spent some of his earlier years there and lived there, as well as some of the research he's done. So Craig is here today to talk to us a bit about the work he has been doing with his team to develop a standard protocol for using trail cameras to monitor the relative abundances of feral cats, mustelids, and rodents. And so, you know, this comes at a really timely moment for us in the Predator-Free Te Tai Tokerau community, given the growing focus our kind of community ecosystem in Northland is placing on monitoring. You know, so we're hearing from you that there's a real need and demand to build capability and capacity around monitoring, because we understand the value that monitoring places and keeping communities engaged and empowered by the work that they're doing on the ground in Te Tai Ao. So without further ado, I'll pass the rako over to Craig to take you through his research. Kia ora, Craig.
Cheers. Thank you, Cameron. Yeah, g'day, folks. As Cameron said, my name's Craig. I'm a principal scientist based here in Hamilton, and I primarily work on feral cats, mustelids, and rats. So yeah, I'm going to talk to you this afternoon about some work I've been doing trying to standardise a method for using trail cameras to monitor the relative abundances of mustelids, feral cats and other small predatory mammals for conservation in New Zealand forests. But before I rip into that, I might just go through some terms that we use here in DOC, because I've probably scattered them through the talk. So sort of at a general level, we do a thing called surveillance monitoring. So that might be where we're just going in. It sometimes can be quite informal to provide information on the condition of a heritage asset. And in the animal pest space, that might be, we might use some dogs to find out if there are pests in a site. We might set up some cameras or some traps to see if we've removed all the pests, or to get some pest abundances. So that's that sort of more sort of low-key or less structured surveillance monitoring. But another term that we use is outcome monitoring. So what I mean by that, it's using a standardised monitoring technique to find out if there's been any change in the population size or the condition of the native species or ecosystem that we're interested in a site, and also to understand if we've achieved the conservation objectives we intended when we went in there to do that management. So the sorts of things, and again, some of the folks up north, you'd be familiar with things like kiwi chicks, you know, close order monitoring, like kiwi chick survival. And for, you know, another example would be sort of long-term monitoring of birds using, say, for example, 5-minute bird count. So that's outcome monitoring. But mostly what I'm going to be talking to you today about is a term we use, result monitoring. So that's where we use we're setting out to find out, determine the effectiveness of any of our management actions. So in terms of pest control, you know, this could be using a standardised but independent from our pest control method to measure how well we've controlled the pest population. It's really critical that it's independent too, and it is independent of our management method. So, for example, trap catch is useful data, but it doesn't tell you about the pests that you haven't controlled. So that's why we would sometimes use things like wax tags or tracking tunnels. You know, they're independent of the management because they tell us a bit more about what we haven't controlled. And there are some advantages to standardising monitoring methods. Firstly, you know, like if we've got standard methods, it enables us to compare a bit between sites. It now allows us an element of audit if we want to know what's happening at a site. For example, what's your rat tracking tunnel rate like? That we kind of know a little bit about what that means. And also, it's really useful if we're learning how to manage pests. You know, it teaches us how well we've controlled them. But a really cool aspect of standardising these monitoring techniques, and the classic example is the Kōkaka research by management, project led by John Innes and co. in the 90s in the Central North Island, where they developed what we call density impact or density abundance impact relationships between standardized indices using rodent tracking tunnels for rats and standardized indices for possums using the trap catch method. And what they found was if you could get your rat tracking rate to very low over the kōkako breeding season, down below about 5%, or, certainly at that low end. Similarly, your residual trap catch index of possum abundance to very low levels over the kōkako breeding season, those birds do well. And that's a classic example, which has sort of been replicated for a few other bird species now, and we're learning it progressively. And again, it's because we've got these standardised measures that are independent of our management and we can learn from it. So, trail cameras. So back in 2010, 2014, I led a project in the Whangamarina wetland where we attempted to find out if trail cameras would be a good way of measuring ferret relative abundance and feral cat relative abundance, and other pests, but mainly those two in a wetland. And what we found was that the trail camera indices of ferret abundance were strongly and significantly correlated with live trapping estimates of ferret abundance at that site. And similarly, the indices of feral cat abundances were moderately but still significantly correlated with feral cat abundances in the site. So that convinced me there that actually these trail cameras are the way to go. They're a relatively, in the grand scheme of things, affordable off-the-shelf piece of technology, and it became rapidly apparent in that project that they've got, many advantages over other methods like tracking tunnels and such like. And I had a lot of people asking me, how do we use these things? At one point there, I was probably providing advice on a fortnightly, when it was almost a monthly basis to sites. But the Whangamarina situation was quite unique. So what I did was I drafted up, once we published the Whangamarina stuff in 2018 in the New Zealand Journal of Zoology, for anyone who's particularly interested in that, I drafted up an interim protocol for using trail cameras to monitor feral cats, mustelids, and rats at least in forest environments and other environments. The general basis of it was the stuff we did at Whangamarina, but also the core of it was based on our 2013 DOC tracking tunnel protocol for mustelids. There's an assumption there that if the lines are spaced well enough for mustelids, that probably fits for feral cats as well. And our target audience for this draft protocol was DOC operations teams or community groups that want to use trail cameras to monitor these pests, but really in the smaller forests, certainly work much less than 10,000 hectares, but also for people who are looking for a simple, hopefully, standardised and would result monitoring method for measuring the relative abundance of these pests so we can find out how well their management is going. So that was that. That came out, sort of first draft came out 2018. But of course, we can't really chuck something like that out there without testing it. So that's when we sort of, I had to go away and started the research program to validate and reality check this protocol. So the guts of it is based around these trail cameras. The trail cameras themselves are set low to the ground. They are, within 6 to 50 centimetres above the ground. In the centre of the field of view is a lure comprising a piece of fresh rabbit, a large piece of fresh rabbit meat, and that's in between two pieces of conurbations arrays. The lure is pegged firmly to the ground, anywhere between 60 centimetres up to a metre or so, and even a metre and a half, in front of the camera in the field of view. It really depends on the camera what that distance is, and the camera is sort of angled slightly downwards to contain the field of view and stop what are called false triggers. Cameras themselves are set to photo mode, so taking photos in 3 photo bursts, so it's triggered, takes 3 photos, and then it's got a forced delay of 5 minutes. So it's not going to take any photos for 5 minutes. And the surveys themselves, where we've landed is we're running those for 21 nights. The survey is comprised of survey lines. Each one of these lines should be in a randomised, stratified layout in the environment you're interested in. And each survey line comprises 4 cameras. They're set 200 metres apart. And if they run the whole time, that gives you, so each camera is running for technically about 500 or just over 500 hours. And with 4 cameras on the line, that's about just, 500, sorry, 4 cameras on the line is 2,016 camera hours, which we're converting to an index of detections per 2,000 camera hours. So that's the guts of it. How have I been validating it? So the first part is the bit that I've been doing at Waimanoa, Perura Forest Park. And what I've tried to do there is replicate what we did in Whangarino. So basically, I have run 19 seasonal sessions, and each session compares of a live trapping, 2-week, 10-night live trapping session where I trap feral cats, mustelids, and rats, and that's mark recapture. So they are sedated, marked, measured, get some other info, and that gives us quite a good, like a gold standard, hopefully, index of abundance. And then immediately following those live trapping sessions, I run the trail camera survey using the protocol that we've developed. And I've purposely used very old cameras. And there's a reason for that. I just gone for least common denominator. Don't want to flash new cameras. I'm trying it with relatively old ones. And the idea being is if the live trapping index and the trail camera index tell us the same story, if they're positively correlated, it means it's probably working well. But there's also, that's not the only part of it. So the folks at Tongariro Kiwi Sanctuary and the Boundary Stream Mainland Island in Hawke's Bay have agreed to help me out with this. So at Tongariro, where that site is managed with approximately 3 yearly aerial tornado operations. And they also do outcome monitoring, where they measure kiwi chick survival, which is a really good indicator of how the stoke control is going. And they also use 3-night mustelid tracking tunnel surveys and 1-night peanut butter tracking tunnel surveys for rodents. So they've run 16 seasonal surveys there for me. At Boundary Stream, they have run 18 seasonal surveys. Boundary Stream is it's an intensively managed site where in theory pest numbers should be at really low abundances. But what they're doing there is they're also using tracking tunnels for rodents. So between those 2 sites, I've got another opportunity to validate that draft trail camera protocol and the indices we're generating against standardised rodent tracking tunnel indices and at Tongariro mustelid tracking tunnel indices, which we kind of know work, or we know more about them anyway. So again, if they correlate positively with what we're seeing on the cameras, this shows it's working. The other thing about that is, we've got operators deploying the cameras and trying to run the surveys according to that draft protocol. So I get a lot of feedback I have got a lot of feedback from them about the language I've used, things that aren't self-explanatory. But also, as I said at the beginning, I've had a lot of people over the last wee while asking me, how should I set cameras up in these sites to monitor this stuff? So I've been getting a lot of feedback from them as well, people who've picked up the protocol. And actually, if you're listening to this and you've had a go at using this draft protocol, I'd love to hear feedback, negative or positive. It's all good feedback. So where have we ended up? Well, the reality is I collected my last trail camera survey from Waimanoa just 2 weeks ago. And so I am still sitting on hundreds of gigabytes of trail camera data from these sites that I am working my way through. So yeah, no flash analysis to throw up on the screen at this stage. However, from the data I have looked at, it would appear that the trail camera indices, are reflecting what I've seen in the live traps at Waimanoa and what I have, seen from the tracking tunnel industry. So it feels like they're telling the truth, but we won't know until I've managed to get through all those data, generated the indices, and then done the correlations. But what we have learned is a lot of lessons, and I'll go back to the other slide just to talk to some of those. The the method is really sensitive to the presence of feral cats. And it's also, it seems to be much more sensitive than tracking tunnels for the presence of stoats at low abundances, which was our big challenge with that method, to be fair. But that's come with its own challenge. We've got this issue. We're actually oversampling stoats and cats. We get individual cats, particularly I've noticed it's younger females, will hang around one camera and lure for a long time and maybe hit several cameras along the line. And similarly, again, it seems to be juvenile stoats. You'll get a lot of stoats hanging around on the same camera for many hours, which is kind of a nice problem to have. But it means that I need to think a lot more about what sort of index we generate. Cameras getting stolen is still a bit of a problem. One of the good things about having the cameras down low, and there's been a bit of a debate in the community whether they should be mounted high or mounted low, but I think my own experience, mounting them low definitely reduces the chances of cameras getting stolen. Doesn't stop it, but it certainly reduces the chances. And another thing I've really learned is that they're not a tracking tunnel or a wax tag. I think people who are operating these cameras need to be really familiar with the model of camera they're using, how they work, how to set them, and how to configure them in the field. I think if you've got volunteers using them, they need to be well trained. I've had people setting cameras upside down, they get wet, they die, or not centering them properly on the lure, which takes a little bit of skill and a bit of knack to do it. The slide's got a lot of text on it, but some of the other things we've learned from the sites, particularly down south, camera safety where Kia are present. We had some folks doing some work for us down around Fiordland, and the Kia really went to town on the cameras. So I think in those sort of cases, you would probably be wanting to deploy your cameras in security cases. I think lure safety, we're putting this fresh rabbit meat lure out there. Weka love it. And they're quite good the cameras are quite good at detecting weka. But I think in those cases, if you've got weka around, your lure basket is going to have to be really well and firmly fixed into the ground and secured into place. And I think just that whole lure presentation thing, I think I'm going to have to make it clearer in the protocol that you've got to kind of set it the way we've described it, or as close as you can to the way we've described it in the protocol. And that's because the hoop that I put the fresh rabbit onto is actually 250 millimeters across, 25 centimeters, and it's in the center of the image, and it's really good for scale. Very helpful to easily tell the difference between mice and rats, but also occasionally in a blurry image, it will help you work out whether you're looking at a weasel or a stoat. In terms of managing that issue around the oversampling I talked about, well, I think for rats and for stoats, and probably weasels, don't know about ferrets, but I think just treating all images captured within a 30-minute period as one detection event should get around the worst of it. We're going to test this with the data. But what I'm doing at the moment for the feral cats is I'm literally just counting the minimum number of individuals I detect per 2,000 camera hours for the survey. And, in some of these cases, you can easily tell individual cats. I think in some cases it wouldn't stand up in a court of law, but yeah, I think as a simple method, and if you're sort of honest and you're going for minimums, I've got a tabby here and a tabby here, I don't know if it's a different cat or not, just say one. Anyway, so I think that's the way I'm going to go. Again, it needs to be tested with the cats. And another bit of feedback I've had is, maybe with the protocol, include some worked examples of how, to help people understand how to calculate the index. Cool. Just some other final thoughts. Now that I've sort of come to the end of the data collection phase of this work, I wonder, even with the cameras configured the way they are for these small mammal pests, whether they could be a potential outcome measure for some native species. We've routinely detected kiwi at Tongariro and at Boundary Stream on these things. Don't know, they're probably configured right to detect kiwi at least. And I don't know if you can see in that, I'll get my little laser pointer, in that right-hand image there, this is from Boundary Stream, that is a kōkako there. And we've actually detected a few of them there in the camps. I don't know that it's would be a particularly good method for them, but it was neat. We did it. Yeah. Yeah, and I think even in that configuration, it does have the potential for measuring other pest mammals. Certainly possums, but again, somebody probably needs to calibrate that for possums. Maybe pigs and goats. Again, the cameras are set low and deliberately set low, which means that you do detect deer. If you look in that left-hand photo, it's a typical deer detection, but they're certainly not Facebook quality photos. And yeah, finally, just some other thoughts about using trail cameras to monitor feral cats, mustelids, and rats. I think if you're planning this stuff, you need to think about the upfront and the replacement costs of cameras. You know, they are relatively cheap, certainly compared to what they used to be. But some cameras, the really flash cameras, are quite expensive. But you can get some reasonable quality ones. But they're not, again, they're not a tracking tunnel, right? So they do cost quite a bit of money. You need to think about batteries, SD cards as well, and they don't last forever. You know, they're out in the environment, and they get wet, and if you don't look after them, they can, certainly with moisture, they can pack up pretty quickly. But yeah, they don't last forever. So you've got to think about replacing them. Theft, as I said, keeping them low, I think reduces that, but doesn't get rid of it. Yeah, and the final point really is, and I think this is the one that a lot of people don't think about, and I could probably almost include myself in this. The data analyses and curation. You generate a lot of data with these trail cameras, particularly when you've got quite a few of them out in a survey for 21 nights. Just classifying the images manually takes time, and there are lots of things to help you do that. But it's also prone to human error. The good news on that front is there are some artificial intelligence tools coming online that are getting better at image classification. A colleague of mine in my team, he has been working with an external contractor, and they have developed a classifying tool that will batch classify data. A few little things they're ironing out at the moment, but once that comes online, I think we're going to have some pretty good tools there. So that the classification thing's being sorted, but actually calculating the index is still cumbersome. Hopefully one day some smart kid will come up with a pretty cool app to do it, but in the meantime, it's still, needs a bit of work to do. And finally, file storage. I've been working with trail cameras now for, I guess, coming up 13 years, and I have got terabytes and terabytes and terabytes and terabytes worth of hard drives here in the office and at home, backup copies at home, and I'm sort of wondering what I should be doing with it all. But yeah, that's it. And I think trail cameras are the way to go, and I'm feeling really hopeful. So thank you.
Oh, kia ora, Craig. Thank you so much for what a really eloquent and succinct kind of summary of the who, what, why, and how of your research and trail cameras, and I think at a level that really makes sense for our community. So I think for me, at a high level, it's just been a really great insight into how we can be using data to inform our approach. I think in the past with the collective, we've had the likes of Brent Bevan and others come to speak about some of those really, really high-tech solutions of today and tomorrow, including using AI. While all of those things are exciting and inspiring for our community, we know that it's not always easy for our audience to navigate or access those tools. So I think it's really great that we've got this, really simple kind of explanation of the work that you've been doing. And for our audience who perhaps don't work in conservation and are volunteering, as a side gig, this is a really good kind of introduction to trail cams and some of the approaches that they can bring into their work. And equally, fantastic to hear that you haven't necessarily been using the newest and the flashiest gear, because we know that that's equally, our community groups are working on the smell of an oily rag and have to kind of work with what they've got. So it's fantastic to hear about the alignments there. So yeah, thank you so much. I think you've given our audience a really great understanding of the latest approaches to using trail cams when monitoring predatory mammals. Equally, I think those opportunities around you know, the ways that trail cameras can actually help us measure native species. I think that's a really important flip side to that coin. That'll I think is a real motivating factor for our audience, as well as some potential next steps in terms of analyzing data and even accessing some of those new AI tools in a way that's appropriate for our community groups. And generally for our sessions in this quarterly Hui, we have an opportunity when it's a live session for our audience to ask our presenters questions. Obviously today we aren't in that space, and if you're listening or watching this, this happened in the past. And while I haven't asked Craig this, I'm hopeful that given he's open to feedback, if our audience do have questions, perhaps they can send them through to me, and then I can collate those for Craig to answer at a later date. Does that sound okay, Craig?
Oh, absolutely, totally.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for your time. Mihi ana kia koutou. And yeah, really appreciate you contributing towards this broader kind of space that we're in Predator Free, which is very much about building capability, sharing our success, our experiences and insights as a way of us, you know, improving our work on the ground and working towards a Predator Free 2050. So thanks so much again, Craig.
Awesome. Cheers.